Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the podcast Rise and Tell with Shikha. I am your host, Shikha Singh, and today I have a very interesting personality and the guests on the podcast. You know how we always have these weird thoughts about death and regrets and a lot of things that we often tend to neglect, thinking, oh, yes, we have tomorrow. We are going to do this 5 years from now, or when I retire, or when I hit this XY milestone. But this guest is going to change your perspective on death. I know the topic is so controversial and emotional for some people, but trust me, when you listen to this podcast, it's going to make you think like, yeah, I think maybe I should cross this off from my list and start doing things today and not wait till I am 50 or retired, etc., etc. Our guest for today is Jodi Wellman. Jodi Wellman is the author of the book You Only Die Once. I told her that I'm going to record her introduction after I finish reading the book. I just didn't want to go off of some website or, a bio and get her introduction and just introduce her. I wanted to finish reading the book and I was impressed. Everything that I've done since reading that book has been because of Jodi Wellman. Jodi is the founder of 4,000 Mondays, and you'll know why 4,000 Mondays when you listen to the entire episode. She is not just an author, she's a speaker, she's an assistant instructor at the Master of Applied Positive Psychology program in the University of Pennsylvania. Her book, You Only Die Once: How to Make It to the End with No Regrets, made it to a lot of different reading lists. She's also delivered a TED Talk in 2022, and I think it is the 14th most watched TED Talk. You can go to her website, check out more about her, but this was my experience after talking to Jodi. The energy that she gets in the podcast is infectious. She literally makes you want to think about why you haven't done certain things or why you haven't crossed off certain things off your list and what is it that you're waiting for. I thought it would trigger a few things in me if I would read that book about death and, regrets, etc. But I found it refreshing. It was amazing. And she brought out certain very interesting points and concepts, which we as humans tend to just forget because of our daily lives, our careers, our families, responsibilities, and a lot of things. I suggest you read You Only Die Once and How to Make It to the End with No Regrets. And then let me know what you think of it. Let me know how many Mondays you have left and what you thought about this podcast. So, without further ado, here's Jodi Wellman for you. So, there you go. We have Jodi Wellman with us today. Welcome, Jodi. We are so thrilled to have you as a guest on our show.
Thank you. I am really excited to be here to get to chat with you.
Same here. All right, we'll not waste any more time. We'll just get right into it. I love the concept of the book, and I've heard of TED Talks that you've given. I know the backstory, but I want my listeners to hear it from you. What actually got this concept in your mind?
Well, thanks for asking and for your kind words. And I do recognize that when someone starts talking about our mortality, it does tend to elicit questions like almost like what happened to you, which I know you didn't ask it that way, but what on earth? And I look at this like a couple of things. One is I've always been interested just in this absurdity of the fact that we live and we want to live lives well and then we're going to die, which is weird. But even beside that, I had the unfortunate, sad experience of having my mom die when she was 58 of a heart attack.
I'm sorry.
And I think of it now, and I think about how it wasn't even her dying that was so jarring. I still miss her and love her. And the most eye opening thing for me was that I was cleaning out her place after she died. And in her drawers and in her laptop, she had all these dreams that she didn't take action on.
Right.
So, like, she used to write, she wrote manuscripts, she wrote short stories, but she didn't send them out. She had all these business plans for little, like I remember one was she was going to do a all natural dog treat business and she was making them and she did these like she did up the business plans and all these ideas that she didn't take action on and that felt so sad to me. Dreams that were dormant,
Right.
like she buried them with her and it just felt like the saddest thing to have creative ideas and plans and hopes and desires without any action. And that really woke me up.
Wow, that is so interesting. Why just Mondays?
Yeah, right. Well, when I talk about 4,000 Mondays, Mondays are the worst day of the week. And I know that it's like, why would you call your company the name of the worst day of the week? Okay, I get it. But let's just do a little experiment. If it was 4,000 Saturdays, you'd
Mm,
be super happy. And like, trust me, I love the idea of being happy. I want us all to be happy, but it's not visceral enough. It's not back to the idea about being like eye opening, like, unfortunately, my mom dying with all those regrets. It's a way to do this test, I think, in life and think, okay, on a Monday morning, when you wake up, are you looking forward to the week ahead? Are you dreading it? Are you excited to live? And maybe it's an indication that you might want to make some changes, or maybe it's an indication that you're already doing the right thing and that's awesome and do more of it. But it's more of the, quite frankly, it's like I want to shine. I want you to look into a big bright mirror and say, like, how's your life going? So when we count down how many Mondays we have left, I want it to be a little bit more startling than
yeah.
just a Saturday, which is always lovely and delicious.
Correct, correct. Agreed. I know that you've spoken at a lot of conferences and different types of crowd.
Yeah.
According to you, now that you've been there and you've heard so many people, you've heard about them, their stories, you've shared your story, what do you think is one of the major regrets that people in their 30s to 50s have?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, what a cool question. I've never been asked it and I have an answer. And I'm going to base it on my experience, like you said, of asking workshop after workshop, like talk after talk, but also combined with the research because my experience does track with the research. 30 to 50 in particular. The biggest regret tends to be thematically, I'm just going to start broad. Most of us tend to regret the things we didn't do more than the things we did do. So what I don't hear is, "Oh, I regret that I bought that house in that town and it didn't appreciate the way I wanted." No, it's about regretting not maybe being a little bit bolder and going for things. So, I regret I didn't put my name in the ring for that big job. And this is especially more of a female trait typically than a male trait statistically, right? Like I didn't feel I was fully qualified. I really wanted that big job or I wanted that opportunity, but I didn't go for it because we're afraid of rejection and failure. And so it's a lot easier to stay safe and not put ourselves out there. But we tend to regret it over time. Like, why wasn't I bolder? Why didn't
Yeah,
I take the risk? What was the worst thing that was going to happen to me? They said no,
correct.
or similarly, like I wish that I had maybe I had gone back to school. Now, I will always say to people, by the way, just because you gave the range of 30 to 50, I talk to people in their 50s all the time who are like, oh, I wish that I had studied graphic design at school, or I wished I'd gone into something creative in this way, or I want to go and I wanted to do coding and I never really just, I always say it's not too late. Because that's the whole moral of this story, right? It's like in any talk I do, when someone says, I wished I'd applied for the job, or I wished that I'd gone back to school, or I wished I'd moved to Maine, or I wished all the things that they think would be cool to do. It's not, it's like rarely is it ever too late, unless you've retired and you don't plan on working anymore. But
Correct.
it's never too late to even go back to school or to make a move or to pick up salsa dance lessons or to do any of the things that we long to do. So I think for most of us, it's about being a little bit bolder and exhibiting a little bit more confidence in our choices and being willing to maybe not even have it work out, but get that very, very, very satisfying feeling of trying rather than not trying.
Correct. I agree. And you brought up such a great point, Jody, when you said it's usually a trait of females,
Yeah.
statistically speaking. A couple of years ago, I did write this article for my company's blog post, and it said why women need to speak up at their workplace. Why is that? I mean, if you were talking to a group of, let's say, 10 to 20 women who are
Yeah.
really scared, the biggest thing that I notice is they come with an amazing resume. They're super talented. But if they have a gap year, or let's say two gap years because they had a baby or other, they were
Yeah.
caretaker, they are so hesitant to apply
Yeah.
for that role and they think they're
Yeah.
not worthy enough or not qualified enough. What would you suggest to people who think like that?
Yeah, you are so right that it is a pervasive problem. It's systemic oftentimes. And I'm just going to go really macro for a minute and then we can get into more detail. The biggest macro thing that struck me as you were saying that is I always come back to this. It's that life is too short. So I realize it sounds just so easy and dismissive, but it's one of those things where it's like not just counting how many Mondays you have left to live in your lifespan, how many Mondays are left in your career? And so when you do that and you go, oh my goodness, maybe there are only 740, why why am I playing it small? Why am I worrying right now about my qualifications? Why am I diminishing the fact that I took off a year to raise a newborn that actually adds more value because I've shown that I can do a billion things at once and I actually have better qualifications for this job? Why am I not basking in the glow of all of the credentials and the experience and the character that I've built over time? Sometimes we just need to put it in perspective of what do I have to lose? Because again, time's ticking. So sometimes that can be an impetus for us, is a little bit like, well, we're all temporary anyways, might as well go for it. And if I get a no, I get a no, but at least I tried. Again, back to that feeling about the distinct satisfaction on the deathbed of saying, I'd rather know that I tried and didn't get something, or I'd rather know that I tried and did the job and didn't like it or whatever,
Yeah.
than that I always wished I had and wondered what life could have been like. So I think that the macro thing is like, life's short, why not? And then, quite frankly, the other thing is we lose touch. Like confidence is often something that we wait for. Confidence and courage are the two things where we're like, when I get more, confident, that's when I'm going to apply for the next thing, or I'm going to go out on a limb, or I'm going to speak up in a meeting. When I get confident, and we often forget, myself too, because I can be the biggest chicken. It's like, wait a sec. Confidence and courage comes from doing the things that are difficult, like applying for the big job or offering a maybe stupid idea at a meeting and seeing how it goes, and or starting your side hustle to consult, starting your business on the side, or all the things that we long to do. Is that it's by doing it that we start to go, oh, wow, I got my first client. Or, oh, wow, my boss said that was a kind of an interesting idea. And then we get more confident to do it again and again and again. And so we just have to, quite frankly, push ourselves, even when it is not comfortable, not waiting for it to be comfortable first, because that is a bus that will never come.
So true. Wonderfully said. You heard it all. You heard it from the expert herself. I want to get into this concept and this model of living that you started, Jodi, astonishingly alive. How did you think of it? How did you come up with it?
Okay, thanks for knowing it. And also, it's hard to say astonishingly alive. It's not an easy thing, it doesn't roll off the tongue. Okay, so this to me is, I'm so excited about it because it's this part of a quadrant. So, if you get an x axis and a y axis, all of a sudden you have four quadrants. And the one we want to get to is living and feeling like we're astonishingly alive. And that is by feeling like we are living wide with vitality. That's the fun and the pleasure and the cool stuff we do, where we feel like fun's being had. And then it's deepening our lives with meaning, having that sense of purpose and connection with other people. And anytime we are plus on vitality and anytime we're plus on meaning, we end up in that astonishingly alive zone. And one thing I've become aware of is that, like, I chose the word astonishing, and that's like a pretty grandiose word. And I realized, because I would talk to different people about it, and then I found people were getting a little bit maybe defensive or shut down because it sounds like you need to live a life that's fancy and it sounds
Okay.
impressive to other people. Like,
Okay.
what concerts are you going to, and what dinners are you going to, and what trips have you booked, and what's the what's your latest volunteer, what nonprofit are you starting? And all of a sudden I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like, that sounds like a disaster life of pressure. And it's exhausting, and we usually can't afford it, and we don't have time for it, and oh my gosh, now I just want to get under the covers. And How about it being relative? So, astonishingly alive is anything that makes you individually feel just like you're living your life and you're showing up and you're participating and like you have enough of that width. So, you're having enough fun and you're having enough of that depth. You're having enough meaning where the fun doesn't feel empty. And you're feeling like, man, like I'm living, I'm doing this thing. And yeah, we could always do more, but that's not possible. And yet, so we're not leaving life on the table, or we're not
Right.
letting life pass us by, or we're not like squandering our lives, which is the opposite of the astonishingly alive life, is that squander life where all of a sudden it's Thursday night and we're wondering like, where did the week go? Because I have nothing to show for it. All I was doing was answering emails.
Yeah. So, just based off of that last statement there, Jody, how does one come out of that rut? How does
Yeah.
one come out of that feeling, when there's literally 10,000 meetings that you have to attend to every day, be there for someone all the time, and then as soon as you clock out, your shift at home begins.
Yeah.
And then you're
Yeah.
staring at another big screen. So, how does one get out of that?
Yeah. I don't want to be so sensitive to it because I don't want it to sound dismissive that we just have to go do a fun thing and go out for a nice dinner when you're like, I have laundry to do and I have kids at home and I respect that. And I think that this is a good time to talk about how I believe that we tend to overestimate how much we have to do in order to really like our lives, and we underestimate the impact of tiny small things.
Hmm.
And when we go from lives that are inherently busy, so you talked about 30 to 50, and that's
Yes.
the bullseye
Yeah.
of the time of life when work and often home life are at their fullest. And my recognition of that is also to um, say if you can't stop those trains and you don't want to stop those trains because maybe you like your job and maybe you like your home life and your kids, hopefully you don't at least hate them, then you want to be mindful of the small moments in life that do bring you joy. And I think sometimes it's as simple, and I know it doesn't always seem simple, but of being cognizant that, like, let's say you said 10,000 meetings a day, and I had this happen to me today. Somebody canceled a meeting.
Sorry.
Do you ever have that where you're like, somebody just rescheduled a meeting and now all of a sudden you have 30 minutes or an hour?
Yep.
And I know what we all do is we get caught up. We're going to answer more emails or we're going to respond. And I'm just going to encourage us to say, what if even 15 minutes out of that time is something that we do that makes us feel alive? And maybe for you, it's I'm just going to go for a quick walk around the block.
Yep. Yep.
Or I'm going to just get on the floor and I'm just going to just pet my dog and brush my dog. Or
Yeah.
I'm going to go outside just for a quick second and take a few deep breaths and look at the birds. Or, at a lunch break, like I'm actually going to read a chapter in a book. And I know I could be catching up on correspondence at work, but I'm just going to read a chapter because that makes me feel just, again, a little bit
Right.
more like I've made time for me. Or maybe it's as simple as you got to make dinner anyways. What about trying something new? Like I'll share with you, I have Instacart coming this evening and I'm going to make a new lentil sweet potato salad recipe. I've never made lentils in my entire life
Ooh.
from hard lentils. I've only ever had them canned. I'm going to make real freaking lentils tonight. And it's only going to take
Wow.
me 20 extra minutes. And you may say, I don't have 20 minutes. Okay, fine, use the can. But then trying a different recipe is my point. It's like the simple little things that sometimes just add a little more interest to life. That
Exactly.
doesn't mean that we had to book off a personal retreat for 3 days or go to Bali, right?
That's the whole point. I feel like at this point, the society has given self-care a completely different meaning, which is no longer free. It's like, okay, it's a self-care day, meaning you have to spend X amount of dollars at the spa, X amount of dollars at your whatever retreat or trip or something, or get your nails done, maintain them, or get rid
Yes.
of your facial hair, and all these standards that have been set. But all it could boil down to is you just doing something that you love that doesn't have to cost you $1,000
Yes.
just to
I,
make you feel alive.
oh my gosh, thanks for that summary. That's one thing I notice in a lot of the workshops I do that it keeps coming up, and it's reassuring to me that the things that bring people happiness, because I actually have this little exercise where I'll say, take out a piece of paper and write out 30 things that make you happy. And the caveat is that they can't just be big, big fancy things, like meaning you have to be able to access it. generally, like through the week at some point or in the month. And for most people, it's the sweet, simple stuff, like someone just saying going and tending to my garden just makes me feel so happy. Or it could just be, giving my daughter a bath. Now, sometimes that's stressful, I've heard, but just be
It
like
is.
like being there in the moment. And
Yeah.
I think that that is so much of what's available to us is it's a lot of it is right there for us. And we again back we underestimate the impact of, maybe it is just I'll give you an example. One woman I know, she's still commuting to work most days a week and she comes home and before she goes inside to visit her family for the rest of the night, she sits in her car and she said she's made it like a little sanctuary. She's got like a little scented thing. It's not a candle, but she's got something scented. And she says, I close my eyes and I listen to a meditation for 10 minutes. And
Wow.
she flips through her phone and just looks through pictures that make her happy. And she's getting herself grounded and centered. And then she goes back inside and she said, those 10 minutes are some of the best minutes of my day because I'm getting myself ready, for the next phase of the evening, which might be chaotic and it might be joyful and it might be all the things, but it's like even carving out 10 minutes just for grounding you, or maybe it is not grounding. Maybe you want to go and punch a punching bag for 10 minutes, but finding little bits that make us happy and actually devoting and committing to doing it. I think that's the
True.
difference, you know? Like, is there something that you like to do that might be just cheap and cheerful that you like to do that makes you happy?
Yep. Me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Books and cheap candles. I like to burn through candles. That's why I mentioned cheap because I don't
I'm
think
gonna
I can
say, yeah, they
afford
better
it.
be cheap if you're burning them heavy.
Okay, but yeah, you were so on point when you're telling start slow, and I think that's the whole principle behind anybody trying to achieve something bigger or larger in life. If someone wants to lose weight, they have to start slow if they've never exercised one day
Yes.
in their life or whatever. So same thing for staying alive and feeling lovely about being alive.
Yeah.
But I wanted to know, Jody, what if there are certain people who have never had any tragic experiences? Like they have both their parents, they have a wonderful family, everything, and they've never felt that grief of losing a parent or a grandparent. Everything's okay, but they still complain about few things, and they're you get that vibe from them that, oh, only if they knew what they have and the value of what they have. So what would you suggest to someone who hasn't had such experiences in the past and who wants to actually feel good?
Yeah. Well, you're reminding me of how in one of the chapters in the book I talk about wake-up calls. So people who have had near death experiences or even just a brush with death, how they have an approach on life that I admire because they're just really they've become awakened to life. And I think, man, like I haven't had a near death experience, which is probably a good thing. And yet here I am, like I'm taking my life more for granted than they are. And I kind of want to know, like, how do you get what you got? So back to your point, no one would ever wish that you would have an important death to someone that you love. And that's not what we're looking for. But I do agree with you that there can be a real sense of poignancy and meaning that can come from hardship. And so if you're saying that someone has not had any of those experiences, number one, I think that the gratitude practice is just so central. It's like stopping it and acknowledging that. So I think, again, back to taking for granted that maybe you have all of your loved ones around you or that you have a decent existence around you. It's stopping and saying, wow, let me just look at this. Let me take stock.
Yeah.
And, there's tons of research in the well-being world about the value of practicing gratitude. I think the next step is death acceptance. And so a lot of faiths, whether they're Buddhist traditions or different philosophies, will extol the virtues of stopping and reflecting on the inevitability. Because I think that what happens is those of us without a lot of experience with loss tend to feel more shocked by it when it comes. And I'm not suggesting that we get really depressed in advance. But what I am suggesting is that we stop and say, this is inevitable. And actually, in my book, I include a five-step meditation that a lot of people within, I think it's the Bhutanese or within the Buddhist faith, will follow. And it's kind of looking in the mirror and kind of like, I am perishable. I will start to age even more rapidly than I am right now. Like I
True.
will die. And I recognize that that might sound very grim and to do it at your own extent. For some of us, some people, I encourage them to have a different view on plant life, how every bouquet of flowers you buy will die. Maybe that can be your sort of silent inside meditation about, right, I'm acknowledging what was beautiful yesterday is starting to age and it will start to, the leaves will fall. Recognizing the changing of the seasons as it's a gentle acceptance that loss and grief is inevitable, it's natural. It doesn't make it any more fun because it's natural, but it is part of life. And so it's sort of a doing yourself the favor of contemplating in advance can prepare you for death, but it can also, this is my whole thesis, is it makes us more tuned in to the lives we get to live right now and be way more deliberate about them and living them with more of a sense of urgency and intention and passion than if we just sort of ignored the fact and whoop, then I died, but I didn't participate.
Yeah, that's true. Amazing, amazing things to just digest and think about because there's so much good stuff that you just mentioned, Jody. It's That's the whole point. I feel like not many people stop. They don't pause to think about that. They only do it after the fact or after something's happened.
Right. And you're pointing out something that is so unfortunately true about our humanity is like we often need a nudge or
Yeah,
a kick in the pants.
true.
Like a lot like some of us are more self-motivated than others, but like most of us need a little bit of like, oh, let's say a negative event or impetus to create change, to create the next step, right? It's like
Right.
someone needs the heart attack in order to start exercising, or they need to kind of gain the weight in order to start feeling like, oh, I might want to start to feel more fit again, or we need the threat of loss in order to take something serious. And that is why I get us to count how many Mondays we have left, because it's called temporal scarcity. And it makes us tune into the fact that, oh, right, we are a diminishing resource. And when I see that, I might treat my life as more precious than if I just never paid attention to it. And I always just sort of like delusionally kind of just thought, oh, I'll get to do it later. There may be no later. Later is always like, I mean, I don't know if you can see my face right now, but it's like later. Maybe it won't come.
Yeah, yeah, true. All right. I do have one last question for you, but before I ask that question, I'm going to ask you one more question, Jody.
Okay. The question before the question.
Yes. If you had to give one solid advice or one solid suggestion that people can take today
Yeah.
and implement it, just to not feel bad about this or they don't have to wait for a near death experience to feel alive or something, what would that be?
Huh. My first instinct right away when you asked that was to count how many Mondays you have left. And there's a calculator on my website if you don't want to do the math. But women start with 83 minus your age, and then multiply by 52. And men start with 78 minus your age, multiply by 52. Those starting numbers will vary a little bit by country, of course, but they're good starting points. Let that be that, again, back to the kick in the pants or the spark plugs to go, right. Like we all rationally know roughly how many years we're going to live, and we all know we're temporary, but it's when we do that granular math that sometimes it can create the discomfort that's needed. Back to that idea that we need a little bit of that, the scarcity to take action. And I have to add a part two to it because it's more than just, great, thanks. Thanks for reminding me that I'm going to die. Always valuable. It's that, so now now that you're reminded that this is a ticking countdown, what are you delaying that you might want to get on with today? Like, what would you regret on your deathbed? If your deathbed happened to be tonight, of all nights, is there something you would think, oh man, I wished I had done that thing, but I didn't do it? Like maybe it's learning a language or taking up a hobby or telling someone you love them or making up with a family member or doing something, getting your hair cut or trying out for the improv in your town or anything goes. There are a million examples, more than a million. And if there's an example that might make you think, oh, I never really made the time to do that. I always said I would do it later. My encouragement, even if time is tight, is to prioritize yourself and say, okay, you're not dead yet. What might it take to go and maybe carve out, if it is the improv thing, what if it meant taking Thursday nights to get a babysitter and just go and do it, and it'll bring you more joy and you'll come home happier, and you're setting an example for your kids that mom makes time or dad makes time for joys in life. So
Exactly.
that's a very long answer to starting with counting your Mondays left and then identify one, like a regret in the making, and do one thing to counteract.
Wow, I think I needed that. That
We all
is
do. We
so
all need to be
cool.
reminded, right?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna finally start working on my second book now. I needed to listen to this.
Well, that's so exciting. Can we ask about what it might be about?
Yeah, it is going to be a dystopian romance kind of setup, but I'm working out the last few things and loopholes and trying to build a world. I do have it. I do have the outline, but I just have to sit down, write all the details, and be like, "Oh, what if?" and then contradict my own ideas.
Yeah. My goodness, you're already down the path. This is so exciting. You get to pick it up again and you're going to prioritize this and we're going to hold you accountable.
I will. Yes, thank you. I needed that. Okay, so now to the last question. This is a little personal. I know you mentioned today you had a lot of meetings and felt like it was 10,000 meetings. So, personally, what are you going to do today that's going to make you feel alive?
I love this so much. Okay, so I alluded to it by telling you about the Instacart coming. And
Yes.
so one thing
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
well, I'll elaborate because it's, I don't do it a lot as much as I think would bring me joy. So this is a good lesson learned right now. But a new recipe is always a little adventure. But one of the things I do to make it even more interesting is I don't tell my husband, and I make it a surprise. So all he knows is I'm making a special dinner and he can't look when all the grocery bags come. And I'm going to set it all up and he can't look, but he gets to pick out the wine. And I'm going to make this thing. And if it's a disaster, we'll laugh about it. It'll always be hilarious. But if it turns out well, then it'll be just a fun thing. And I will now know how to make lentils. And so I am just really excited on a random Thursday that this is the lentil adventure of a lifetime.
Isn't that fun though?
It is.
It is going to be worth it. I know.
I'll be sure to tell you how it turns out.
Definitely. All right. I will wait for that message from you, Jody. But thank you so much. This was amazing and I learned so much and I definitely hope our listeners would have gotten a lot more value out of this talk. So I really thank you for being a guest on the show and for taking our time out of the 10,000 meetings to be on the show today, Jody.
Out of the 10,000, this one takes the cake. And thank you for having me here.
Thank,
It's a total pleasure to chat with you. You're great.
thank you, Jody. Thank you.
Thank you.
I hope you've learned something out of this podcast episode, and I hope you're inspired to go do all the things that are in your, if not all, at least some of the things that are in your to do list that you've been putting off for a future date. I know I did some of the things that were in my list, and that's why the new name Rise and Tell with Shikha. If you are new here, then I welcome you. Thank you for joining us. And you know what to do. Hit the like, comment, subscribe button and keep watching for more stuff. As always, keep growing, keep going, and be yourself. This is your host, Shikha Singh, signing off. Bye.